Can everyone do this? Everyone? Yeah, good. Connection made. That was a Bluetooth fist bump. My friend Arthur taught me that. It's what all the cool kids in London are doing, apparently. So yeah, hi, I'm James. And these are my friends, the Render Ghosts. I'm not going to talk about them too much today, but they're very important, and I'm glad they're here. The title of this talk is We Found Love in a Coded Space, which is a reference to Rihanna, architectural theory, and software studies. So let's go. This is a quote from an interview with William Gibson in 2007, which I love. Because there's this common misconception that sort of artistic creation happens in a vacuum, that storytellers like to kind of cut themselves off from the world, and that they need to sort of remove all these distractions and attend some kind of Zen-like state, which is what Gibson says exactly what he doesn't do in this quote, where he says, it's like when he's writing, he's got Word open on top of Firefox, right? He's like writing as part of the network, and the writing itself is kind of embedded in the network. It's a process that happens entirely in the world and in the network. So he says that the big end universe, which is the universe of his last few books, is essentially ours today, right? All the books exist in the world. Gibson's world is slightly different to ours, but it overlaps with the famous quote that I'm not going to say out loud. There's something strange happening. And the most amazing thing that happens in his last book, right, is that you're reading it, it's like it's science fiction, it's kind of whatever, and suddenly these huge silver flying surveillance penguins turn up, and you're like, brilliant, like that's proper science fiction, that's the future. And then you go on YouTube, and you discover that these things are real, that they actually exist in the world. There's a company that makes them. And not only that this YouTube video that you see, these penguins are flying around inside this huge white office building. And when you read the book, that's the same place that they're flying around in the book. That he's just taken this kind of whole ready-made out of the network and put it into his story. And for want of a better word, I've started calling this thing network realism. This thing that our stories exist kind of overlapping with the network, and some people who are better connected see further across the network. But this is kind of what we build stories out of now, and this is what I'm going to expand on today. And I want to talk about another concept as well, which Sebastian mentioned briefly yesterday, which is code space. Code space is a term, again, from architecture theory, from software studies. And the canonical example is an airport check-in lounge, right? So we all know this space. We know how to function in it. You go there, you're kind of processed through. But what's interesting about this space is it functions entirely with the assistance of software, right? If the baggage handling and the package and the check-in stuff fails, this whole space collapses into a big warehouse full of angry people, right? It ceases to function without this co-creation of the space through software. Right? And an increasing amount of our time now is spent in these code spaces. Right? And there's all kinds of examples of these. The airport one is a good one. But I kind of want to push the metaphor a bit further because I think it's important. I'd suggest that most of our cultural lives now, and particularly our literatures, are also spent in code spaces. We live in a world where we increasingly outsource our memories and experiences to the network, right? Which is fine, it's good, but it has these kind of intense consequences for us. That our time is kind of spent in negotiation with the network in order to understand these memories and experiences that we have. And that our experiences are co-created with these repositories of memory experience and so on, online, on the networks. And I want to make that point with one caveat, that space is a really bad metaphor for the internet. We've used cyberspace and stuff for a while, but actually it's not a good way of thinking about it. The internet is not a space, and the good way to think about that is trying to think about what public space on the internet would be like. There is no such thing as public space on the internet. And actually, internet is not a space, the network is not a space. It's like a kind of whole other dimension, time, space, and the network that we have to think about very differently. But with that in mind, I'd say that that culture and literature are now coded spaces. So compulsory slide, we all know what this is, right? These are the financial algorithms. We're all Kevin Slavin now. And we understand what this is and what these are. But you have to understand something specific about these financial algorithms that are in our networks, that are controlling our economy, is that they're a particular kind of bot. They're a particular kind of artificial intelligence. They're basically kind of coked-up city boy of the algorithm world. They're wankers. Like, they're not nice creatures, but they're very expressive. And they're the ones we seem to be thinking about a lot, and they're the ones that we pay a lot of attention to. But there's all kinds of these artificial things. I prefer these ones. These ones are more interesting to me. These are the ones I'd like to be friends with. This is a list of the top 30 editors on the English Wikipedia. The ones marked in yellow are bots, right? So 2/3 of the top editors on Wikipedia are bots. They're algorithms. They're robots. They perform a kind of really interesting variety of tasks. Number one there, SmackBot, prevents edit wars. So when it notices that an article is being updated different ways too quickly, it just locks it down for a while, lets everyone chill out. There's other things as well. There's ones that go around adding signatures and stuff, ones that go around adding metadata, ones that go around adding imagery, public domain imagery to articles, or finding orphan works, basically making the whole thing function better, right? But Wikipedia is big. Wikipedia is important. I personally believe, and I really believe this, that Wikipedia is like the crowning cultural achievement of humanity of the 21st century so far. And also, it's like an entirely new paradigm in how we construct and understand and co-create human knowledge. That's quite a big thing, right? That's a big deal. And yet, a huge part of it is being created with the assistance of these artificial systems. And these artificial systems have agency, right? They have a reason and a purpose. And this guy, I got this from Stuart Geiger, link at the bottom. Like, check him out. He's an anthropologist, a sociologist, who's studying this stuff and looking at the ways these things have agency in the world. And they have motive, and they have intention, and they're doing something. And we're sharing the world and knowledge with them, right? And then you get stuff like this. This was a comment on one of my blogs recently. And I genuinely don't know if it's by a human or a spam bot. I don't know if this is a human pretending to be a spam bot to freak me out. I don't know if it's a spam bot who's got quite good, so good that it's pretending to freak me out about being a spam bot. Like, we're increasingly running into this. It's weird, right, that it's us, frequently, who have to prove ourselves to be humans on the internet. Every time you enter one of those capture things, right, you're having to prove that you're human. That's not how Turing thought this would work out. This is my favorite one. This is the one I'm completely obsessed with. This is on another blog I found, and I'm just going to read it to you. It says, "Sorry, I'm telling you, things are getting out of hand. Or maybe I'm discovering that things were never in my hands. Help me. I find sites on this topic, replica firearms for sale. I found only this, replica Rolex for sale. Replica, Rome is the court to many being areas. Replica, 12 wrote environment years along the college change principal exploration. Waiting for a reply, sad face, Jerusha from Senegal." I feel there is something in here that is calling out to us, right? There is something that is trying to speak to us. And what this most brings back to mind for me is Rilke, because I'm always thinking about Rilke. And this quote that says that perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act just once with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love. That's what those spam bots feel like to me. They feel like things that are trying desperately to speak to us, that want our love, but they don't necessarily know how to speak to us. And to be honest, we're not trying to listen. And that's something I'm trying to investigate and understand. So I'm going to tell you about a recent project that is an attempt to understand that in some way, right? This is a room for London. It's an art project on in London at the moment. It's a public art project. It's a ship on top of a building. It's a one-room hotel. You can book a night and stay there. And it's magnificent because it's right in the center of town, beautiful views, wonderful thing. And it also takes a bunch of artists and writers in residence and musicians, and they do things in it as well. And the whole thing is this sort of ongoing art project, an architecture project. the main influence and inspiration for it is Joseph Conrad and the story of the Heart of Darkness. So the ship is called the Roi de Belge, which is the name of the riverboat, and it's modeled after Conrad's actual riverboat from the Belgian Congo in 1898. And it's a lovely thing. It's a beautiful thing. It sits up there. It's kind of inspiring. It's a wonderful place to be if you get the chance to go there. But there's several kind of things that bothered me about it. One of them is that I'm not a huge fan of Heart of Darkness. There's other stories of Conrad that are interesting. And also, the ship doesn't go anywhere, right? It's a failed ship. It's a lovely thing, but it just kind of sits there, and it's going to sit there all year. So I wanted to do something about that. And I was asked to provide data-y, internet-y stuff to this boat. So this is what I did. So I put a weather station on the roof next to it. That's what that thing up there is. It's a weather station. And it monitors the wind direction and the wind speed, temperature, humidity, and all that kind of stuff, and it pushes it out on the internet. So you have like this data object, this representation of this place on the internet to play with. And so for a month, I've been imagining what this ship would do if it was untethered. If it could fly, essentially, if it could float through the air on the wind, if it was drifting, if it was a ship adrift, right? So every time the wind blows, if the wind's blowing 5 miles an hour to the east, the ship adrift moves 5 miles to the east. And I've been tracking this, as I say, for a month. And this is where it's gone so far. And it's lovely, because for the first kind of 10 days, it just went straight for Poland, which is like Conrad's nominal heartland, right? So that's right. It had to go to Poland first. And then from there, it could kind of go anywhere. And when you're doing a project like this, you become really aware of the weather. So like when it does that sharp turn, that first big sharp turn it does, the wind changed in London, right? Obviously, that's why it's doing that. 2 days later, we had snow, and that's the wind coming down from Siberia. And you become intensely aware of these natural patterns, even though it's just these streams of numbers on the internet. And it's doing something else as well. So as it's going along, the ship is looking around itself. It's finding, it knows where it is, and it's looking on the internet for things about where it is. So it's looking for Wikipedia articles that have a latitude and longitude attached to them. It's looking for geotagged photos, for tweets, for Foursquare check-ins, all this kind of stuff. And it's trying to build them into a picture of the world, trying to understand it, trying to then play those back. And so it's kind of creating this log of these things that it learns, and it's trying to speak them back to us. And what I'm trying to do here is trying to create a kind of framework for collaborative storytelling with these automated processes. That's the kind of long way of saying it, but also I just like it. I love the language that it uses. I love the way that it sees the world. I love the things that it says on Twitter. It has a Twitter account, and it speaks. And you can follow this journey that it has. You can see it kind of trying to make sense of the world. And I love that it's a year-long project, and this will go on, and hopefully over the year it will become smarter and learn more. It's very dumb at the moment, but you can feel it trying, which I love. And I'm loving watching other people's reactions to it as well. This was a lovely reaction for our friend Keller. Nothing recently has spiked the pangs of wanderlust quite as sharply as Ship Adrift. And it's true. The ship is going places I've never been, and I would really like to go. And it, as a side note, like, this is a thing. Right? This is a made-up word, but this whole thing is a thing. And this is a made-up word that means, but it's German, so it's real, that means street view wanderlust, right? This is the process of seeing distant things through machines and having an emotional response to them. And that's a new thing. That's like genuinely quite new. I mean, you would have had like kind of postcards and stuff in the past, but having total access to the entire world's surface through satellites, that's a big deal. And I don't think we've yet even capable of processing our kind of cultural and emotional responses to that. But it's going to come, and it's increasingly a thing. Even though it seems like normal, I think it's warping our whole view of the world in ways that we don't quite understand yet, and I'm excited to see what that means. But this is the other really interesting response to it, I think. And I've only kind of realized this in the last few days. This is a comment my friend Rachel made a while back about the ship. She says, is it Nordic Polari? Now, for those who don't know, Polari was an Argot. a kind of secret language, a language that exists within another language for various purposes. Like Valin in French is an example of an argot, or Creoles and Pidgins may be examples of argots. Polari was a very specific argot in that it originated in sort of 500, 600, 700 years ago. It came out of Romance and the Romany Gypsy languages. It was the language of travelers, of fairgrounds and carnival folk. And in the 19th and 20th centuries, it became, in one example, in the Polari that we mostly think of, it became the secret language of gay men who were working in the theaters, who needed a language in which they could converse. And the thing is, she's not wrong about it being Polari. She's not wrong with that being the reference, because one of the sources that the ship is using is gay personals that it finds on the web. This was one of the things that I kind of linked into it. This is an earlier project with a system that walked randomly around London attempting to cruise people online. So I took this and I applied it to the ship. And it started finding these personals online as well. It started trying to talk to local people who were looking very directly for love and sex. It gave it a kind of added emotional tone to the Wikipedia thing. And it's slightly sad because actually the system it was using just blocked it. It just got cut off a couple of days ago. They realized what was going on and they shut it down. And the ship now can no longer access that information. And this makes me really sad, because there's a reason we have Polaris. There's a reason we have these argots. The point of an argot, and the point of Polari very specifically, there's two, and they're kind of opposite and interacting. And the first one is that it's a language in which you can speak about things of which only you can speak, and there may be a danger of speaking to others about. And that sometimes it's necessary to say things in secret and not have them understood by outsiders. And there's also a group identity, that by speaking in this way, you assert an identity. And that's a very key thing. And I think that's what the bots are doing. They are using an argot for both those purposes, because they're speaking both to each other, and they're asserting an identity which is different to ours, but it's definitely part of our community and our language. Argots are really important. And our reaction to a lot of stuff online and a lot of new technologies, and a lot of technologies, but specifically these bot ones, because they're so personified and so anthropomorphized that they're a very obvious one to talk about, to use this to talk about, is very resistive, that we want to cut it off, that we don't like it, we want it to back away. These are dragons, not princesses, and they're scary. And there's bad things about that, because I love these dudes. Right? I follow mostly spam bots on Twitter now, because I love the way they speak. I love who they are. This one's a bit aggressive, but he says some nice things all the same time. And every now and again, Twitter's algorithms get good enough that it spots another kind of species of bots and just wipes them. This is a memorial page, right, for Danessa Goretzin. Danessa Goretzin is dead. Twitter killed her. And I miss her. She was sumptuous and aromatic. She was appalled and off balance. That was her, right? There was a nascent personality there. There was something kind of addressable, something that was attempting to speak. And we kind of cut it off. And if we keep killing them, they're never going to achieve sentience. And that will be a shame, because we share the world with these things. The way we create. Well, I was talking about these coded spaces that are co-created between architecture and software. Like, our imagination, our histories are coded spaces. They're co-created between our imaginations and the network. And that's the sense that I want to end on, really, is this idea that we increasingly inhabit this incredibly coded world. We've outsourced so much of our histories and emotions to the network, that our stories are already extant in the world, like Borges's kind of Library of Babel. They exist out there. We just need to put them into the right configuration for these stories to kind of come out. And the stories are co-created by these kind of vast, overlapping virtual sensoriums we can access through the network, many of which are now artificial, but no less real for it. And they're all out there, these consciousnesses, these ways of seeing in the world. And what we need to do is to be sympathetic to them, to ask them into our lives, to try and collaborate with them rather than shut them down, because they are all looking for love. They all want to speak to us. They all want to be a part of the world. And all I ask is that you look at them with happier eyes and invite them into the world and speak to them. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, James. That's great.
Pleasure.
We have two questions. One for you is, in tradition of literature and stories, there's a beginning and a middle and an end. We don't see many endings here. Can you talk to us about endings? Do these bots end? One died, but can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, the endings question is a really interesting one. Because it's a problem we have for our digital stories is that we don't know how to end anything we put online. And that's kind of a problem with the medium. I have a whole other bunch of work that's about history and memory and nostalgia on the internet, and particularly we deal with endings badly, the canonical example being GeoCities. I grew up in GeoCities. It was a place I spent a lot of time, and one day it got kind of erased, it got wiped. I don't know how we deal with endings. It's one of the purposes of the Ship Adrift project, is to try and understand how to tell a story over the course of the year and how to end it, how to resolve, and I don't know how it's going to end yet. But the internet's old enough now that it has history and it has things that have gone, and we need to think very soon about how we deal with remembering them and ending them. But I don't have an answer for how we do that yet, but we're working on it.
Okay. And not in terms of an ending, but what's next? What's next for you? What's on your horizon? What are you working on? What's interesting you right now beyond what you've just shown us?
More of this. All these projects are things that I've made with no idea what the outcome of them will be. Right? So every one of my projects is more interesting after it's been done. Something will kind of come out of this and build on it at the moment. At the moment, I'm probably interested in how these personalities, how this kind of writing, how these stories on the internet interact with people's personal histories. What they're willing to share with them, what they do with them over time, what their endings are, how we preserve a certain amount of that. So it will continue to be about personal history, probably with, I don't know, I had a really good conversation at dinner last night about privacy. We'll do some stuff about that. Understanding how people value their own personal histories in a time when it feels like everything is so diffuse and on the network.
Thanks a lot, James.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.